All right, welcome to the discussion session of Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. We'll start with review of agenda items for tonight's meeting. Major McGill, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. We did not have a second meeting in July, therefore we have a fairly long agenda for this evening. We have the consideration of a resolution opting to participate in the Allegheny County Community Development Block Grant Program, Home Investment Partnership Program. These programs provide funding to local governments. We use the CDBG block grant program for our ADA ramps that we do annually. We run that through ShakeUp. There's also the request consideration of a resolution accepting a police traffic services grant. It's the PennDOT grant for DUI, aggressive driving, occupant safety enforcement, and pedestrian safety. We've gotten these historically in the past. There's no cost to the municipality. We simply administer those, I'll say, operations, and sometimes we pull neighboring communities in, so it runs through the municipality. We have the receipt of the capital improvement program for the 2024-2028 public hearing in October. We will put that on a future discussion session so we can go through it a little bit more fully, and commission will have the opportunity to ask questions. We also have the consideration of final approval of subdivision plan for the residences on Poplar project located on Pennsylvania Boulevard. We will also have the consideration of final approval for the residences at Popular Land Development Plan and consideration for the execution of a development agreement and stormwater operations and maintenance agreement with that same development, the residences at Poplar, LLC. We have the consideration to purchase one animal control truck kennel, the consideration of bids for solid waste and recycling collection services. We'll hear more about that in a minute. We also have the consideration for the rejection of the Mount Lebanon Public Safety Center roof replacement project. We talked about that at a previous discussion session. And then finally, we have the consideration of appointments to serve as junior commissioner for the fall and spring term.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, the solid waste contract or solid waste recycling contract. So, McCreary, Rudy, what you got?
We've got a presentation here for you, Mr. McMeans.
Yes, I'm here.
He's here.
I'm joining virtually thanks to the wonders of modern technology. So last meeting, Mr. McCreary was virtual and we've switched spots tonight. So thank you all for having us once again. You all have received some lengthy bits of information in advance of the June 28th discussion session, a essay as we dubbed it at that time, and then a slightly shorter essay or memo maybe this time around that detailed the decision points that are remaining for the commission as we make the award for our next 5 years for the solid waste collection contract. So just as a reminder of the decision points, we're talking about the collection method, and that's the primary one, whether it's manual collection or automated collection. And then if the decision is to go with automated collection, there's a sub decision point of who provides the bins for trash and recycling, whether they're provided by the contractor or by the municipality. And then also a decision point on recycling frequency, whether we go with biweekly or weekly recycling. So there is an agenda item for vote tonight, as Mr. McGill mentioned on the agenda. And then a secondary decision point for either tonight or some later point in time is how to pay for the cost increases associated with the new contract, because regardless of which contract we select, there will be cost increases. So as we discussed at the June 28th meeting, those cost increase decisions don't have to be made tonight, but Mr. McGill did request that the commission give him some direction there in advance of budget season so that he can craft that into not only his budget message, but also into the overall structure of the budget. So with that in mind, we talked about those decision points. We did decide at that June 28th meeting to do billing on a per unit basis, which is how we're currently billed. And our decision was to continue that, which staff is completely in favor of that, and the commission was as well. So additionally, following up from that meeting, there was some additional information that staff was able to obtain. This was through meetings with both bidders on the contract. We met with representatives from Westmoreland Sanitary Landfill and from Waste Management. So one of the questions at that meeting was whether or not there was an option to change between weekly and biweekly recycling during the contract. That option does not exist. Also, I should mention that we reached out and got some clarification on some bid items from Lou Gorski at Shaycog, who kind of oversaw the whole bid for the 20 Shaycog communities that took part in this collective bid effort. One big piece of information that did change from the last time we met is that Westmoreland Landfill has indicated they would provide the same level of curbside collection service that we currently have in our current contract. So last discussion session, there were some questions on if we went with the manual collection, would people be able to continue to use their own trash bins or put out extra bags, or what that would mean. And we got some clarification there. There was a letter in your packets from Westmoreland Landfill that indicated they were willing to provide the same level of current service, which would be up to 15 bags of trash per week and essentially unlimited recycling each week, for if we went with the manual collection option. And under that, residents could still use their existing trash bins. Residents could still leave, cardboard boxes out beside the recycling bins like they do now. There wouldn't be limited to just what fits within the bin as they would be with the automated collection option. From the waste management side, there was a big question there on what the charge might be, because their bid was the one to switch to automated collection. If there would be any charges for hauling away the existing trash and recycling cans that residents are using, then the key piece of information there is they would not levy additional charges for the removal of those bins. So if you remember back from the previous discussion, we had a fairly large one-time cost budget number in there for that removal based on how we were reading the bid, but that number actually does not apply to communities that are changing from manual collection to automated collection during this contract cycle. So that number went away in your updated cost proposals. And also we did get some clarification from Waste Management that if we decide to go with the automated collection option, we would have the ability to select the colors and logo design on the automated collection bins, because whether they're provided by the municipality or provided by the contractor, we would own them at the end of the 5-year cycle. So we have the ability to design them as we choose. So we have 4 primary options for consideration. As we discussed, Westmoreland Sanitary Landfill was the low bidder on the traditional manual collection option. Waste Management was the low bidder on all of the automated options. Actually, Westmoreland indicated they could not provide automated collection to Mount Lebanon, so Waste Management was the only bidder for us on the automated collection options. So you see here kind of the breakdown between who provides the bins, how much trash and how much recycling can be collected, and what the limits on bulk items are. So Waste Management's bulk item limit was 2 items per month, and that would be collected once per month on a designated week. Westmoreland indicated to us that their preference is actually to collect 1 bulk item per week, rather than having 1 designated week where anyone could put out up to 2 items. So a little bit of a difference there as well on the bulk item collection, but really the big difference is in the amount of collection options between what residents could put out as far as trash and recycling for the traditional manual collection versus the automated collection being limited to what they can fit in 1 96-gallon bin, which we would get a 96-gallon for both trash and recycling under that option. And residents could purchase an extra bin through the contractor to increase the amount that they could put out. So if you remember from our last conversation, in the automated options, we have number 2 is the full contractor provided, number 3 is the full municipality provided bins, and then number 4 is the hybrid approach where the contractor would provide the trash bins and the municipality could provide the recycling bins. So we'll keep those numbers consistent as we work through the rest of this discussion, but just wanted to make sure that there was some clear delineation there. So the options by total cost, the cheapest overall option, or I should say the least expensive overall option, because they're all very expensive, it's not cheap. The least expensive overall option is the traditional manual collection, followed by the contractor provided bins, and then followed by automated collection where the municipality provides either just the recycling bins or both the solid waste and recycling bins, and those numbers jump up because of the one-time costs to the municipality. And then also the commission asked us to look into weekly recycling costs. So once again, the traditional manual collection was the least expensive option for weekly recycling. But going from bi-weekly to weekly recycling would add 2.7, almost $2.8 million to the total contract cost. So if you remember back to the previous slide, which was over $18 million in total cost, you'd be looking at $21 million in total contract cost to add in weekly recycling. So finally, our staff recommendations, given the costs of everything and the fact that we as the municipality would own the collection bins at the end of the 5-year contract, even if they are provided by the contractor. Therefore, we are recommending against the municipality provided bin options. So that would be options 3 and 4 that were presented on the prior chart. So we're recommending the commission decide between traditional manual collection, which was option 1, and automated collection with contractor provided bins, which was option 2. Also, because of the cost of going from bi-weekly to weekly recycling, staff is recommending staying with a bi-weekly recycling collection. And then as far as methods of payment goes, I know I said we don't have to have a decision, but because we're talking about it, just figured we'd throw out the staff recommendations on that as well. Staff recommends against millage increases to pay for the increased contract costs and recommends the commission consider a phased conversion to a solid waste and recycling fee over time, instead of doing the full fee right up front of the whole contract amount. That there's ways that we laid out for you as addendums or appendices, appendices, I guess, to your memo this time around on how a potential phased fee conversion could work. So really, I think that's pretty much all the information that the commission asked for. This is just a side-by-side of the two options basically that we are recommending the commission decide between, and the difference between them. And so I will now open it up to the commission for any questions you might have and for discussion, because this is your decision to make and you will have to vote on it tonight.
Andrew, welcome back to undisclosed location. Did you and Rudy have anything you want to add before the commission starts beating this thing around?
I think it's let the volleyball begin.
All right, okay. Who wants to go first?
Well, we could run down the list of decision points, maybe. There's a way to go through if you want, that last slide, if you don't mind, Ian.
Yeah, so the very last slide, yes, is the next step on, yeah.
There we go, yeah.
Controlling it in the.
So
There we go.
municipality, we could run down this as a process method and kind of decide each one one at a time in this order, since it kind of the one affects the other.
Well, I mean, to go around and just say, is everybody comfortable with the staff recommendation of just our evaluating option 1 versus option 2?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, okay.
so provided bids, municipality provided bids.
Oh, no, I know, I was just talking about bullet point 1 there.
Not having municipality.
Provide the bins.
Right,
So we're
right,
looking
as
at
staff recommended,
Provided only.
contractor provided bins,
only.
that is what I support as well.
I'm gonna jump straight to the finish here.
Good.
Okay, you want to,
Let's
let's
do
get
it.
your spiel.
I am a firm believer in automated collection for all kinds of reasons.
Right.
All kinds of reasons. I think it is by far the most important thing that we can do as a municipality. However, I think the options that the contractor has offered are completely inadequate to where we need to go, not just as a municipality, but as a region. There needs to be more flexibility in terms of the bin sizes. There needs to be organics included in the bins. And until we get to a place where we can offer a more robust automated framework that we're going to ask residents to switch to, I think it's a mistake to spend the extra money now. And I think therefore we should go with the manual structure we've already got.
I'm in favor of the manual option for, I mean, 1, it's a less expensive 5-year cost. 2, it provides unlimited recycling. Also does not require well, people would have to landfill trash bins, so just that much more stuff that goes in the landfill. So that is unnecessary, that no new trash bins be required. So that's why I'm in favor of option one, which is the manual is supposed to be automated.
I am as well, for similar reasons. I like that the recycling is unlimited. I really hope, just from a public relations perspective and from a communications perspective, we can ask our residents to continue like they do now. We have a very high rate of recycling, but continue to utilize that. I really hate to cut down on our recycling and limit that. And I also am concerned about the gallon size. In our household, we have 48 gallons. I went to Rolliers and test drove a 64 gallon, filled it with stuff, tried to push it around the store, and I struggled with that 64 gallon. So a 96 gallon, I do think filled would be tough for me, especially on inclined driveway. And I am in different physical shape than many of our residents are, so.
Thank you for explaining test driving.
I know that the vendor did, Waste Management did provide the option to downgrade your size, so
But
you
only
could
after
have
3
the option,
months, but only after 3 months.
but only like-
You have to wait 3 months
wait a
to be
couple,
able to downsize the size of your trash bin.
But even at that, to say if someone says, I'd rather have two
but you can't get
36
248s, yeah.
or 248s, except to say, no, only one can.
So it's just your one
Says, But I
can.
need the,
It's 96 and
Yeah.
64, by the way.
right, I'm saying, even if someone did something smaller, it's still only one can.
Right.
So, yeah. So
But I
that's,
do think, yeah, we are gonna, but all these options cost significantly more than what we're paying now, and that's gonna be a tough to figure out already, and that's probably gonna get pushed one way or the other back on the residents, so. It's gonna be a different discussion, but because we're going to ask, or there's gonna be a way to either raise taxes or charge a fee, we're gonna have to pay for this one way or the other. If we paid for it and significantly changed the service that the residents experienced at the same time, I think that would be a much more difficult transition.
About woody waste,
pardon,
woody waste.
yeah,
We talked about woody waste.
Sure.
On most of the letters that we received as commission, not most, but in many of the letters, the complaint was that the woody waste collection is not frequent enough. Is there an opportunity to? I never have woody waste, so I don't know, opportunity to pick it up more often? Or is there an option that they could drop it off at the Public Works? In a composting thing or the golf course?
So we're budgeted, I mean, we
Yeah.
are budgeted to have an attendant there the first Saturday of every month, April through.
At the golf course.
At the golf.
Yeah.
course.
Saturday of every
Okay.
month, drop up. golf
So, I
course.
mean, if we increase that, it would be
It'd just be
a
a
personnel cost for
personnel cost.
overtime right on
Okay.
Saturday.
Want to increase that.
So we could potentially increase that. The curbside collection. That's a more significant expense for the municipality, and we're budgeted through the
Yeah.
year for, I think it's 7 collections right now. We did increase that from previous years. A couple years ago, we were only providing, I think, 3 or 4 initially. And because of the
Demand,
residents,
yeah.
the demand and the request for that, we did increase that through, budget requests, so. And that's substantial over time because that's done on a Saturday as
Oh,
well,
yeah,
so we
okay.
have
Mhm.
typically 10 to 15 employees doing, collecting those.
Collecting it.
And it's a 4 or 5 hour operation, so start to finish.
could we get at some point that estimate of increasing the Saturday drop off of golf course, what that cost would be?
Yeah. Budget.
It's not, I mean, it's not very significant. Well, I'll let the finance director.
Okay, $300 a Saturday. You know, for every Saturday, you want to open additional, it's about $300, 350.
We had a few
Overtime,
requests for
benefits.
the board for that and
Yeah.
the electronic recycling too, but
Yeah.
not like it pales in comparison to the number of tree
Well,
trimming requests or other, like, people wanted it, but it wasn't like a crazy request.
The electronic recycling is done by a third party and they don't charge us for that. They don't charge the residents either. So that's
Right.
basically a free service that's provided for residents once a month. So there's opportunities to get other communities. I mean, we kind of have a reciprocal agreement to some extent with St. Clair. They run their events throughout the entire year. I know some of the residents come to our events and our residents go to their events. If you check the Pennsylvania Resource Council, they also have additional
Yeah,
county,
yes.
different things like
Yeah.
that. So
They do.
there's opportunities at other places.
Yeah.
I've heard from time to time a request for that, but you know, we kind of.
A sense of a scalable service level coming their way.
Yeah, like it seems like that's a pretty easy one for us to fund when we have these budget discussions for a couple more. That might be
The Woody Waste.
good to
So
do.
we,
Yeah.
so the other thing I'll mention is that we
Yeah.
increased, well, we started the household hazardous waste a few years ago. Providing
Yes.
that event, and then you can recycle electronics at that event as well.
Oh,
We're gonna go from 2 to 3 next year. I've already talked to our provider.
Oh, good.
And we will do that at the third one next
So
year.
the
That's
long
no
line
cost, that's no
sometimes.
budgetary
Yeah.
cost.
Yeah.
It's fee based for residents to drop.
They were
things
saying it
off.
was 200 cars or more per. thing.
That's why they
That's
want
why
it.
we're
Right.
going with third.
They said that this is one of the best communities that they come to as far as attendance and.
You can just stop at one best community they come to.
Period.
That's right.
Yeah. Stop.
That's
Period.
right.
Yeah, well, they're always backed up
I
near
know.
my house, so,
Wow.
yeah, it's a long line.
Well, not for that, because they actually said 16 times for that or whatever.
No, it's not.
No,
Whichever one it is, maybe it's.
That's probably.
Well, it still is because it's the best community.
Period.
I'll just mention on top of just in the general conversation about waste. I had a lot of conversation with residents, more on this than I've had even in trees.
Yeah.
Which usually dominates complaints in the fourth ward. For those who I didn't get back to, if you are watching, because I have 117 emails in my email box, most of which say waste management, please vote for this. Or waste, I'm sorry, not waste management, waste contract,
Yeah.
things like that. So I'm sorry I haven't gotten back to you yet. I answered a lot, and they were all what everyone is saying here. Variations of residents who don't think they can lift the larger cans or drive them to the curb or up driveways and things like that. I also just think it's a better option for us to go with this one. So I appreciate the calls and emails from the residents. Some of whom are sitting in the
Yes.
back here. No doubt to comment a little bit, or maybe not to comment if you read between the lines what we're all saying here.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
If you don't mind, on that, I really want to thank our PIO department.
Yes.
Because you
Yes.
guys did an amazing
Amazing
job
job
getting this
getting the word out.
information out. And I love it when residents are so engaged and able to give us this input, and I've heard from
Right.
dozens and dozens of residents as well, and
Right.
this makes our job a lot easier and a lot more rewarding to know what you all want.
And I could tell the impact. You could see when someone was seeing it online and, you know, responding. So it's glad to get the word out. I had another question related to a comment that came in about cardboard. There was a request about a dumpster in Public Works for cardboard. because
Cardboard, that's right,
You
yeah.
know, they use just a
Yeah.
pure amount of cardboard. I was meaning to ask you about this in advance. Don't know what's out there, but just kind of throwing that out as something to think about.
Well, if we do go with Westmoreland, it's gonna be unlimited recycling, so that will be.
That will
and I have
address
to
the
curbside, so that would address
Okay,
that.
all right.
But and also, I mean, that there's been many communities just do a quick Google search of many cardboard bins that get installed and immediately get removed. There is a lot of problems with putting a free dropped off
Oh,
cardboard
Television
bin.
sets and everything else.
You'd be, other communities coming in, it doesn't,
Okay.
Upper St. Clair is automated. They have one bin to put it in and they're being forced to put it all in the new contract. We put a bin there,
Oh, yeah, okay.
forget about it. So,
Thank you.
but there's, yes. Plenty.
One other option I'll add in too is that I know we've been sort of directing people to use the Michael Brothers drop off for glass recycling, in addition to the glass drop off down at Village Square. But Michael Brothers does collect other materials as well. So if
Yes.
people are taking their glass there, you could also take cardboard and other materials to Michael Brothers too. But if the commission decides to vote in the way the discussion is going, then the prior comments are correct that all cardboard will still be collected curbside as well, and glass will be coming back in to the curbside collections as well, regardless of which decision the commission makes here.
Which frankly, Ian, I mean, I'm glad you called that out. I am really frankly disappointed in that. I think glass does need to be separate. I would prefer it to be picked up. I like that fact, but the reality that we're putting it all into a mixed system, I think is a mistake. But again, this just kind of, for me, boils down to, the options that we are being presented are not really forward looking in terms of how we think about materials management, you know, frankly, in most of the country. I've constantly, the entire time I've lived here, been shocked at how much we can throw away without any controls or any real thought. And it's really on at residents, good faith that things get recycled. And I think that's a mistake long-term. And I really hope that if this does go the way I'm anticipating, that we will spend the next 5 years as a community and frankly, as a region, very proactively thinking about how do we build a system that is more flexible, that does put standards in place about what goes into what bin, that does think about organics pickup, that does think about separate glass, that does think about, restricting waste. But this is not the way to do it. This would just make things worse, in my opinion. I think, but we do need to move down this path, and I think it's on this municipality and frankly, the region to do this more proactively and get better contracts.
Can I ask that be the last word on this subject? We're getting a little behind
Yes.
on the schedule. Can we put hopefully maybe on the next discussion session, the question of how to pay for this thing? We're not gonna have time to talk about it tonight, but you're looking for some direction from the commission. So let's try and get that on the discussion session.
And
Susan,
what about
can you-
bi-weekly recycling?
Pardon?
There was one more decision point, bi-weekly recycling.
Oh,
They're asking for our input on that.
okay.
I would go
I keep it at bi-weekly.
Staff
I- I-
recommendation.
Bi-weekly.
Especially since it's unlimited.
Yep.
Well, yeah,
Okay,
well, I'd prefer weekly, it's just too expensive at this point.
so we have at least 3 votes for bi-weekly.
It's bi-weekly.
So, but yeah, so we have to have another discussion about how to pay for this. Be it millage or a fee or both. So, pivoting then to the next on our agenda is the South Garage Structural Study. So, we have a representative from Gateway here, Kevin. Kevin Dan.
Thank everybody.
So we're here tonight, we
Mhm.
had the assessment done on the south garage related to its useful life. Kevin's the structural engineer that's been working on the garage projects. And he's going to explain to us what they found out.
So good lead-in, Dan. So, we're here, as Dan said, to talk about the south parking garage. So an overview of kind of what we're gonna talk about. Tonight, we're gonna have, just talk generally about kind of what the garage is, how big it is, that kind of thing, just to give you an idea of scale. On the garage, we'll talk about some of the history of the garage. We'll then get into a summary of the inspection report that was compiled by Walker Consultants. We'll talk through the options that they presented, and then the costs associated with each of those. Then we'll get into a few general conclusions, and then we'll talk through some potential next steps. So from a high level parking garage, it's a cast in place concrete structure. If you know the north garage, that's a precast concrete structure. They built that sort of as what the models kind of think of. So this was cast in place. One of the important things here is there's a cathodic protection system that was installed. And we'll get to it, but that was installed quite a while ago. The idea to prolong the life of the garage. To go through the size, so there's 6 levels on the garage. It's approximately 112,000 square feet. That doesn't include the 6th level bridge, as we call it. That's the access off of Washington Road on the parking garage. And just rough scale, 170 by 110 foot footprint. Does house approximately 300 parking stalls. Some of the parking considerations at the garage. Not only just sort of public parking for all of the businesses and everything on Washington Road. And also the municipal building, but it also does provide parking for the bank, which has, and we'll kind of get to their bridge. And then also on 700 Washington Road. So there's some medical offices in there and they have some parking as well that they utilize out of the garage. Kind of hitting on these a little bit more. So we do have the ramp onto Washington Road, so we know that's the main access into the garage. There is parking that's utilized below that ramp, for municipal vehicles. There's also a business, underneath that ramp that uses the accesses there.
I actually talked to one of those business owners before coming in today. And he said that his landlord is the bank. So that's all bank property down there. But that was his statement. So that whole, both floors, that's all bank property.
That garage does not touch, or does not have any physical except for those two ramps over.
Ramp is ours, everything below that is.
No,
bank.
even the ramps aren't, even the two ramps that connect to that Citizens Bank is not actually our property, correct?
No, I'm talking about the ramp that comes out of
Well,
Washington
Yeah,
Road.
the vehicular ramp.
Yes, the
That's
vehicle
ours.
ramps is
So
ours.
everything below that
That's
is
correct.
And then there is the bridge to the bank and then over to that, 700 Washington Road. Actually 750. 750, I'm sorry.
That's enough.
And
Maybe
then,
it's escalator.
and then the maintenance of those bridges are, by the private owners, but that has been a little bit of a sticking point. The last time we did a rehabilitation, they hadn't really maintained it, which is then affecting the garage that we own. So originally the garage was built in 1966. The cathodic protection system, that was somewhere around 91. I couldn't find an exact year, but it was 91, 92. And then we've had a couple significant restoration projects that have been done on the garage. So in 91, they did a system of concrete repairs and then installed the cathodic protection system. In 2004, there was a substantial rehab project that took place. And then I guess it's 8 to 10 years ago, we did the last rehab project over on the garage. And you can kind of see just a couple of the things we kind of ran into, so you can kind of see. So full depth repair. So essentially we had to cut out entire sections of the deck, replace sections of the deck. And then on the lower picture, you can see we did put a cementitious coating, the idea being that that's going to keep chloride out and prolong the lifespan of the garage.
It's cathodic protection.
So cathodic protection is a system that gets installed into a garage. One of the biggest contributors to degradation of a garage is chloride ion. They're
Right.
rock salt. What a cathodic protection system does is impresses a current within the system to keep the chloride ions away from the steel, the reinforcing steel.
But the source, as you said, is the rock salt cars.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
in a perfect world, if you could keep chloride out of your concrete,
Right.
you wouldn't need that
Prolong the
system.
life,
It would
yeah.
last.
Sure. Thank you.
So getting into the inspection that we just did, so that was done by Walker Consultants. We had an RFP out that was answered by 5 different consultants. Walker was selected. They completed their report in June. So the scope of their assessment was to look at both the building structure and then also the cathodic protection system. Their objectives: determine the repairs that were required, determine the lifespan of the parking garage if no significant restoration project was undertaken, and then determine costs for each of the options that they present. So high level from their assessment, the structure of the garage is in fair to poor condition, depending on what you're looking at. The beams and the columns are in fair condition. The deck itself is in poor condition. Meaning it needs a significant level of repair to bring it back up. The cathodic protection system is no longer properly functioning, and the consultant that was here is actually the consultant who has been on that cathodic protection system for years and essentially said there's no way to get it to work. Again, it's just gone to that point. The concrete slabs have reached the end of their expected service life. And then there is an option to do minimal repairs, completed over the next 5 years. The big caveat with that is at the end of those 5 years, we're looking at a pretty substantial rehabilitation or repair project. Just a couple photos that you can see. So over here is some of the coating that's failing, and you can kind of see. So this is the cathodic protection ribbon that's kind of running there. So anytime you see that kind of coming up, part of the issue with that was it was installed after the garage was built. They cut it in as low as they could without cutting into the reinforcement. Obviously, you don't want to cut into steel reinforcement.
Yeah, don't cut them to rebar.
Yeah.
That's not a good idea.
And then a couple other photos here. So you can see when you see all of this kind of rust coming through, it's a sign that you've got a lot of chlorides and you've got issues with the reinforcing steel. So the significant issues of the cathodic protection system is not functioning, just didn't function. The concrete slabs are at their expected service life. Their estimate was at a minimum 20% of the slabs require replacement or repair currently. That's going to continue to get worse. The beams and columns are in fair condition. There's only minor repairs. And then the existing stair towers and railings do not meet current code, just with handrail heights, stairs, layout, and things. So we had, and we'll go through 4 options here. The first option is to repair the deck and then replace the cathodic protection system. The idea behind replacing the cathodic protection system is that we've still got, even if we repair 20% of the deck, we've still got a high level of chloride in the rest of the deck. So we would want to, or they're recommending to replace that cathodic protection system in order to prolong the life of the 80% that we aren't getting to slow down the corrosion. Their estimate to complete that work was 18 to 24 months. That does assume that we take the garage completely out of service in order to do the construction faster. Their estimate was $7 to $8 million for that rehab, and it would add 10 to 20 years of life to the garage before we'd be looking at another significant rehab. Second,
I'm smiling at you. There's someone in the audience who's making faces at me. Sorry if I'm laughing.
Not a great option.
No.
the next option is replacement of the concrete deck. So that happens a little bit faster at 12 to 18 months. If the garage is taken out of service. Their estimate for that was $9 to $11 million, gaining you 30 to 50 years life out of the garage. So essentially that is ripping out all of the concrete decks, leaving the columns and the beams and rebuilding all of the decks. And notice we wouldn't put the cathodic protection system back in. We would rely similar to what is on the 5th level of North Garage, that sort of polyurethane coating in order to keep chloride. Option 3, always an option, is to just demolish the garage. It would take 3 to 4 months to demolish it. It's approximately $750,000 to $1.4 million to complete that. And then we did provide in here just for consideration, if you're looking at replacing that garage as a 300 space garage, you're looking at $10 to $12 million to build a new structure. And then the 4th option that was presented, what we term minimal repairs. So that's a cost of $150,000 to $300,000 a year. The focus on that is addressing patches that are falling or concrete that is falling, that we've got a safety issue and just trying to keep up with that stuff. Sort of to limp the garage along. They estimated that would add about 5 years of life, but then, as I said, the big caveat with that one is at the end of that, we're looking at one of the, either demolishing the garage or one of the big ticket options.
Kevin, can I ask you a question just to clarify for option 3, for the approximate $10 to $12 million replacement cost? That's essentially just to replace what's existing now. That doesn't take into account any additional I'll say utility out of that space in terms of retail or residential. It's just simply.
That was just, yeah, to replace completely in kind.
Is the thought it would be precast?
That
I
would
mean,
be-
at that price point, just wondering.
Yeah, that's a precast. So just to kind of go through the summary, so option 1, making repairs to the concrete deck, replacing the cathodic protection system, 7 to 8 million. The replacing all of the concrete deck at 9 to 11 million, demolishing the garage at 3/4 to 1.4 million. And then at this point, what we're recommending is the minimum repair option. From a budget standpoint, at $150,000 to $300,000 a year for the next 5 years.
In item 3, there really is the 7.7 to 1.4 million plus.
Yeah.
Rather than 10 to 12 million for
Yes.
replacing the garage.
Yes, 1.4 million gets you a grassy knoll.
Does commission have any questions on the presentation?
None of the presentation. So when, I've been a commissioner now for 6 years, and when I first came in, we were discussing the south garage, and I think just prior to me coming in as commissioner, there had been another cost study done.
There's actually something in the 2013 comprehensive plan. That was one of the 3 key development sites.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about it at least at that.
I know, we really should talk about moving something forward because, and again, I don't remember the date, but it was early 2018, we had discussions about, and then finally a vote to do nothing about it, I think at the time, but it's super expensive to do anything with this, as we can see from this proposal,
And
You
to
know,
do nothing.
and to do nothing is not cheap, but it's the least expensive option, right? So, but it is valuable real estate, and there's a lot that we can do, and just evidenced by some of the things we're talking about with rec center feasibilities and the need for sports field. We've talked about things like grocery centers and things like that. So we need to put some time into this, and I don't think we can kick this can down the road very much longer on this. I think we need to make a decision on it. We need to move it forward, and just figure out what we want to have there and create a plan for it and just do it. And
So you're saying demolish is your first choice, demolish it and
Absolutely, but I understand where we are and I understand the recommendation and I think that's the right thing to do right now. But
Right.
I think, we're gonna have a lot different driving options in the near future. Like, I don't think we need another parking facility for 50 years like the one that we have there now. I just think we're gonna be faced with a lot different transportation issues in the near future. And I think it would be a mistake to do any kind of upgrades or maintenance to this building that keeps it in the shape that it's in. Or tries to put another building of its kind in its place. I just think that's silly.
I agree.
I go back to the ad hoc. In 2013, I was on that board. And yeah, I mean, to look at these numbers of just to fix it is 7 to 8 million, replace the deck, 9 to 11 million. So once you're talking those numbers, so create something new to say, whatever that new thing happens to be, is it, we're talking about groceries or fitness or whatever that happens to be. I think, yes, we have to do the minimal repairs to buy us time. But we better utilize that time well, because 5 years will sneak up on us fast. Let's say, okay, we're gonna keep it going for 5 years. What is the grand plan going forward
Right.
for that space out there?
I'll just throw,
Go ahead.
I'll just throw out that if we're still trying to figure this out in 5 years, we failed.
yeah,
No, I'm dead serious. The reality is that this garage needs to come down.
right. I would.
We all know that.
Yeah.
Now it's a question of how do we go from here to a planned development, likely a public-private partnership with an external party that has a stake in seeing the economic value above parking, successful.
I like that.
And I think that's the question. And how do we, as a commission, get a timeline and a plan from staff that says, here's how we're gonna tackle this? And what's the timeline for pulling it off?
Agreed. I would like further, I would piggyback on that and say, we don't have 5 years. It's gonna take 5 years to come up with that plan, or at least 2 to 3 years to come up with that plan. We have to fund it to get started. So I think we need to start that plan immediately. What is our plan?
And that was Kevin's last slide.
Right.
Because we had a discussion about this. Again, just to look at the building construction costs, as Commissioner Flynn indicated, what are the public-private opportunities? Is there additional real estate that should be considered as part of whatever is going to go back in place? What does that look like? And then from a purely functional standpoint, how do we structure that development, realizing the impact that it will have? Not only on the businesses that rely on it for parking for customers, for the residential at 750, for staff at this building. And again, how do we sort of do that in a logical way that allows the least amount of disruption as
Yeah,
possible?
it's not a lot of alternative parking anywhere.
We have the back of we have the lot behind this
Right
building.
here. Yeah.
If the new design includes
There's the picture.
the
Yeah.
potential to build over top of this lot back here, can a portion of that go in place first, or at least partially replace part of the
Yes.
parking that's going
Agreed.
away?
Exactly.
So there's a
Think
lot.
about that.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna add one more user group, just because we're, throwing down ideas right now, so it gets kind of like put in everyone's mind right now. The parking situation for Mellon and Washington teachers and administrators is not effective. They're parking on their fields and the field isn't usable. So we could partner with them, and provide adequate parking for our
I think
teachers.
the first decision is how many spaces do you need? Given
Right.
the future, where
That's right.
vehicles are, what other uses you would plan to develop here, who's gonna use a car? I mean, that's the magic number, I think. My realization study very recently.
Yeah, my recollection, Mr. McCreary will know wherever he is, it was on average half full. So 150.
Minimum,
spaces.
unless,
That's what's being used.
We have right now,
That's what's being used out of 300.
right? But if we're gonna build something there that's gonna need parking, right?
Then you would need.
Right, well, that depends on parking requirements.
The challenge is this garage, and if you use it enough, you gotta work to use this garage. It's like.
Yes, you
That's
do.
right. And it's hard to
requires-
find unless you know it's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, there's some
You have to
challenges.
know
to
it's
it. I mean, a lot of them too, I think.
Right.
It all could be improved, exactly.
And
Who's the bank building?
Got to tell them.
We won't be confined that way, but it will be a difficult project from a staging and laydown area.
Yes.
There is not a lot of room back
No.
here,
It's not.
that once that structure comes down, to bring in new structural tees and.
Right.
Yeah, we talked
Some of the
about that all.
precast.
If we can conceptually say, look, at the end of the day, the space from where the garage is now up to, through the municipal lot behind the municipal building now. We assume that is going to be, made into parking up to, for argument's sake, Washington Road level, height. And then something is going above that. We don't know what, right? That's gonna be a decision that's ultimately going to, depend on a developer. So the question in my mind is, how do we get to that place where we've built a new garage over the surface lot now, taken the old lot out, and then set the stage for building up to Washington Road so that they can go above that with whatever it is. That seems like,
Yeah, air rights above it.
yeah, everybody's right, but to get to that place, right, where we have transitioned out of this garage into a smaller, but will be expanded garage. And get this down and start putting the new one up.
Right.
That seems like the core challenge logistically. What goes above that, right? We're gonna have to build the garage to support it regardless. But again, I go back to how do we, as a municipality, get this process going, and get the developer at the table, or the developers at the table who want an opportunity, knowing that there's a piece of property right in front of the current garage that seems very interesting in terms of frontage. That those property owners should at least be participating in the conversations.
Who owns those, who owns the bank building? Is that owned by somebody else? Not us. Okay. It's not enough assessor. Them.
And to the point of like, where do we start, when we talk about number of spaces? As Commissioner Reed talked about, well, what about the school district, and do they need spaces? One of the things we've talked about over the years to say, strategy for Washington Road going, we want to say, we want people to park in the garage as opposed to parking on the street. And I've heard both sides, where businesses are saying, no, I'd like to have people pull up and they jump right inside the shop. Others going, no, I'd rather have expanded sidewalks. Whatever that decision is, that is all going to play into the design. And I feel we got 2 years to get all that, so that we say at the end of 2 years, say, okay, now let's get this thing out for bid, that sort of thing.
I think you gotta do a lot of studying and planning on that.
agree.
The thing that scares me the most is when you bring the wild card of the developer in. When I think about it is you need the parking back, right?
Mhm.
If you build the platform enough that you can build on top of it, like just think about it. Let's say you knock it down, you put the garage back up, and right at the top lever, your ability to will be to go up. Somebody will want to do residential because everybody wants to do residential. It's not going to be as much commercial. You might get some small piece of it, but people are going to want to do apartments on top of it,
Right.
which require parking too, right? So you'd have to devote part of that to it. But I almost think that you have to build it, the bones to be able to go up, and then you RFP it to the developers to fight over the air rights. Because I think about like how much we fought on up here at the corner of our Hill Road to get a developer to do something, right? I mean, if you put it in their hands to do, like. It's just my personal thoughts. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there that if we have 5 years to do this, we can, I feel confident we could accomplish the public part of it. If you mix in the developer in it, maybe you have an aggressive developer that would be ready to go right away. But you could always devote the top level to continuing to be able to go up or, have that ability to do it. Right, Kevin? I mean, yeah, so just food for thought.
Plus you have a whole lot more cards when you've done the public part and you have
Right.
that. Then you can hold the developer's feet to the fire and pick the developer you want. And that's huge. There are a lot of good developers and there are a lot of not so good developers out there. And we deserve a good developer. We deserve the best.
The same conversation we had about building over the air rights on the LRT.
That's right.
And creating the development platform, if you will,
Right.
right? We
Mhm.
create
Same
the
thing.
base to build on
Mhm.
with some of the infrastructure related to parking. And then go out to developers to see what
You
kind of
might be
interest.
interested. Yeah.
I just like, is we're at Sunset now and going, this has got a lot more appeal than being over T-Track. This, I mean, people are
Well, you
like.
have to do the port authority if it's.
Right, but I mean, but the idea is that
Yeah,
you've got
that's
the
probably-
sunsets, the views, whatever
Yeah,
else, so
it- it's-
essentially like.
It's a nice piece of
property.
property.
Yeah,
It is.
exactly.
It's got a lot of potential.
So plan of action, well, one is, are there 3 votes for commission to start the minimal repairs as recommended by Gateway?
Yes.
That's 2.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
I do too. I don't want to tear it down.
Well, I mean,
I want to, like, tomorrow, tear it down.
We don't have any place to put those.
at least I got 3 votes for the minimal repairs, and the other one, it's like, so.
So,
Before you get out there with your jackhammer, let's have a plan. So, all right, so at least we got that piece, and then the next is for staff, and eventually with the new boards, as we talked about, one of our 4 boards is this sort of project. To say, does that become one of their tasks to work with us?
I'm sure that the new boards will be involved with that. But I think in terms of next steps,
ad hoc.
commission will see an expansion level in the 2024 budget
Yeah.
for an architectural study or an architectural study
Mhm.
to get us some basic information to actually move forward with.
Yep.
And
With
then,
option 3, tear it down. That's what we're-
well, with
That's what the
the,
numbers
you need
for.
to
yeah,
know.
basically
That's what the numbers are.
going out.
Yeah, that's the study. Great.
As a, I'll say a blank canvas.
Perfect.
Maybe I should tweak it a little bit to say. One, is your support for minimal repairs? I heard 3. Beyond that, to Commissioner Rainey's point, but we know, once we get out to 5 years, we have to do something. I think of the other 3 of fix, and demolish. I think commission sense is demolish and start over again.
Right, and I would add to that, it's not, the decision can't be made in 5 years.
No,
The
we
decision
gotta-
needs to be
No, no,
made
you make it.
tonight.
You have to start that process to
Before, so that we have.
design, this,
Yeah.
architect, all that stuff, yes.
Yeah.
You can't wait till 4 years and 364 days go now. You have to be moving, so, all right, cool. Any other
So
questions,
basically,
thoughts?
we're going the direction of demolish, and that's what we'll see the architecture
replace.
study for.
You'll
that's
see
what
that
we'll
as part of
see
the budget discussions.
Future
Budget
discussions
discussion.
over the next couple of
Someone's
years.
out there with a sledgehammer tomorrow.
That's right, you know who it is. That's right.
Take a little more than a sledge.
Ian, does that
Yeah, I
work
know.
for you?
Just saying, start at the top, not the bottom.
Does that work for you? We answered your questions or anything? Drama, Ian, you're good?
Oh, yeah. One thing I will add is that from the staff standpoint, we've actually already started some of the background work on this through the comprehensive plan. For those that were out at the Uptown Unveiled event, Pashik was out there asking people about what they would like to see in a commercial space above the South Garage. So we knew this was coming, that we knew, the structural study was part of the budget last year, and we kind of knew that the garage was nearing the end of its useful life. So we've had Pashik out there doing research as part of the comp plan project about kind of what the best fits to propose there are. And then following up from that, once you have a plan kind of identified in your comprehensive plan, the whole discussion of, we want a developer to do what we want. Well, when we adopt the comp plan, that's us saying, this is what we want as a municipality. So developer, you have to match what's in our comp plan.
Right.
So some of the background work is done, and you'll hear a lot about that as we get into adopting the comp plan later this year.
Good
Sounds
stuff.
good.
All right, thank you. All right, pivoting to the next subject, which is sidewalks.
Yes, I'm here for that too.
All right.
So we did discuss sidewalks at a previous discussion session back in June. I had presented to the commission a draft of revisions to the existing sidewalk expansion policy at that point in time. I made some further revisions to that draft, which I provided to the commission with track changes format. So really, I think I took the commission's feedback from that earlier discussion session, made a few tweaks to the policy. From an overall process standpoint, the commission also had authorized Gateway to do a type size location analysis, a TSL analysis on certain selected streets. So that work is underway through Gateway engineers currently. And the commission will have a future discussion session topic to review those findings. But for now, as far as the process goes, my recommendation is to adopt the changes to the policy as soon as the commission is comfortable with what is proposed as changes, so that then once we get that TSL analysis, we can kind of hit the ground running come budget time if the commission wants to move forward with dedicating any funding towards considerations of sidewalk expansion in certain neighborhoods. And with the potential changes to the policy, that would give staff the ability to start working with residents in those neighborhoods, to have the policy align with the, what's the work being done and what's budgeted and all that. So I'm
Okay,
open to
with
any
that-
questions or suggested final revisions. Basically, I want to make sure the commission's comfortable before I get an agenda item in front of you to approve this.
Okay, which commissioner wants to go first?
I can go. I appreciate you taking our input and incorporating into this revision. I like it. It's one less barrier by change. But at the last public discussion, we talked a lot about what percentage of residents are needed to get a petition going. I think some of us said just one would be fine. We couldn't come up with a number. In the policy, you proposed 25% of the residents. That works for me. 25%, like you said, it's just one resident if it's on a street of 3 or 4 houses, and et cetera, you do the math. But I still get hung up, then what? So you get your 1 or 2 or 3 residents that, to qualify for your 25%. You take that in. But then as you move down the process, there's still a cost that's being asked those residents to occur, and that cost is not clear. It's not clear to me as a resident. I would support a simple $100 a person. I understand that cost, but 10% of the sidewalk construction cost, which hasn't been told to me yet, or 50% of the total project cost, over $9.50 per square foot. Project cost will include additional costs associated with sidewalk installations, et cetera, et cetera. It's gonna get hard to get to that 100% buy-in that we're asking for this to go through. And I think it's gonna get hung up there and get stuck there. So I would propose first that we have no cost involved. But granted, these are sidewalk installations that the commission has already approved that we want to see done. We ultimately already have the approval anyway. If we're gonna fund 90% of it, why not just go for that whole 100%?
If.
That's my first proposal.
I guess I'm really this for process procedure, and maybe I misread this, which was. Given that this presents the mobility board then enlists Gateway to do this analysis. I would assume Gateway would then give an estimated cost. So at
And then
least.
you need to get 100% of the residents to.
Well, I
agree to
wasn't
that.
he starting to say?
Yeah.
Cost of what? At least they'd have some idea of going, oh, I'm interested. What's it cost? And then that's part of the process. They go, well, we think it's gonna, whatever the next number is.
It's probably range too even. It's probably like a.
But at least it's not a total mystery.
Not
At least
totally.
it's selling some idea of going, okay, that segment is whatever. So at least the residents presumably have some idea
Yeah,
of what number they're looking at.
they'll have some range and
Yeah.
then it's gonna be hard to get to 100%. And maybe some other residents will pitch in for them or they'll create some kind of pool and figure it out. And I like Commissioner Flynn's, suggestion. I see that incorporated in here. There's a 3-year payment plan. But I'm gonna go back to, if we're gonna pay for 90%, let's just pay for 100%. It's ultimately our discretion anyway, where we're putting in sidewalks. We want them. It's for the benefit of the community. And we're already asking these residents to take on B, C, D, and E in the policy, which is the ongoing maintenance of sidewalks, snow removal, maintaining and replacement of existing sidewalks, which costs money in the future, maybe 20 years down the road, waive damage claims and claims for compensation, claim those based on removal of items from the projects, grant permission for temporary easement, and they're asking the residents to take on the cost of moving anything that's in the way in the public right of way, such as landscaping or retaining walls. There's already a lot of barriers.
Commissioner Randy, I agree with the spirit of where you're going. I suspect, though, that if that's the path we go down and we say 100%, what's gonna happen is their future commissions just won't fund it. And therefore, the same result will occur is that we're not gonna pay for it. And therefore, it's not gonna get done.
He's like,
So-
we're not gonna notice though, 90% versus 100%. We're
Well,
not gonna notice that.
again, but we don't fund sidewalks sufficiently now anyway.
So let's make an attempt. This is an attempt. It's a step. We're trying our best to make it easier for residents. and
That's
put more
not,
sidewalks.
but again, this has nothing to do with the budget discussion. This is prompting people to put things at the table and say, yeah, we would like this.
So
But we
could
still
fund
have, but yeah, we still are gonna have to sit at the budget and say, we have limited dollars.
it. Of course.
And
Where's it gonna go?
Yeah.
Which sidewalk?
so I suspect that if there is some community buy-in on to benefit their properties, future commissions might be more inclined to put more money at the table than if it's just being dedicated to tax dollars.
I see your point. I'm still concerned we're just not gonna get any more proposals at all, like we have not now. No one's gonna get those.
I'm with Commissioner Flynn about having something. And certainly 10% is, you just say there's some. Skin in the game. Otherwise, your point about there are other things as well. It just feels more. That it's much like we talk about public-private partnerships. It feels more. Public-private partnership if there's that 10% contribution by the resident. That is my comment. I will one vote.
Well, I think that we do need to get residents at the table financially. I think that's important. I think we need to be more clear on the process. I think the process needs to be more efficient. And it does need to be more clear, to your point, right? I think our experience has been that people are just confused as to what the steps are. So how do we make this as clear as possible to get people in the queue? Right, because
And
then
it's
it's,
across the line too, ultimately.
well, then it's a budget discussion, right? Then it is a budget discussion. But if we can make it really, really clear, right? We've got a great new website. We can do some cool stuff now, right? Conceptually, right? Making that process more efficient so that people can see what the process is and how they go through it. And then how that is communicated, I think will go a long ways to reducing confusion. And making their responsibilities more clear in the process. I think we need to make it more about marketing the program as opposed to legalese the program. Knowing that the legal needs to be there, but that process communication, I think is something that we should focus more on. Recognizing that it's a lot of it's just confusion, let alone getting to the financial discussion. Because ultimately, I think if we really want to force a sidewalk, we can force a sidewalk.
We definitely could, but I think
Resolution, we-
it also comes down to And do you believe a resident wants a sidewalk in front of their house because it benefits them personally or because they want to do the right thing for the neighborhood? I think a sidewalk's a pain in the butt, like honestly, like, but I do want to do it because I think it's the right thing for the neighborhood.
Well, you have one now.
So why are we? I'm gonna have one,
Welcome to the.
but we're asking, we want more sidewalks, we're gonna make it as easy as possible. I think it's our piece.
I'd like to hear just from two commissioners get their thoughts.
I just don't think we need a policy on this. I think we need to figure out our priorities related to sidewalks. We don't have a prioritization for any of this stuff. You know, like we've heard people talk about, well, do we want kids to be able to safely walk to schools? Or do we want to discuss mobility with bikes to connect uptown commercial areas to Beverly or, you know, Castle Shannon or some other areas? When I look, I mean, Andrew knows this, we don't have fancy sidewalks in the fourth ward, so we don't get a ton of complaints, at least I don't, maybe he does, but you know, there's mismatched sidewalks in some areas of all of Mount Lebanon. You'll have like, you know, maybe 10 houses and then it just stops. Like, that's not very helpful either, and I see that as a possibility with this. You know, you get a few people together on a block, like, let's put a sidewalk in, and it goes nowhere, and then you gotta go back on the road again. So I think we need to figure out the best place to put the sidewalks. And I'm not saying, I'm always in favor of involving residents in projects, especially big projects like this. But I think we need to figure out where we are missing sidewalks and where does it make sense that we should have sidewalks? You know, do we go a certain distance from schools? Do we say that every kid that goes to every school should have the ability to have a sidewalk? I don't know, but we haven't had conversations like that. And I think that prioritization needs to happen before we do any work on sidewalk policies that are kind of random.
Well, funny you
Some
could
of
say.
And so they'd like the scoring in the back here, at least to say proximity to school and so forth, that's some of that rating that hopefully addresses some of those questions.
I think, you know, some of the way, you know, it's written, and again, this is a tough one, right? Because we live in a neighborhood that is mostly built. And a lot of these neighborhoods were old where we didn't require sidewalks, right? And we didn't require certain parking. So it becomes problematic when you get to a point where we are now and we're doing all infill development, right? And you're trying to make the little space that you have work with what you want to do, kind of like our conversation with the garage next door. We have limited space, it's going to be tough to develop, what are our options? And that happens all across the municipality with people just trying to combine lots, separate, subdivide lots, even develop little tiny lots and what they could do. We already see running into issues with saldo or zoning because of the tough lots that are left. And I view this as kind of it's a symptom of that problem, right? And I don't think we're gonna fix it with a piecemeal thing. Like if we get a couple residents together, let's put a sidewalk in here, or a sidewalk in that road really might not do anything other than do a little bit of cost sharing. I think we need to have a much better plan of, it's not easy. You know, this is like an entire mobility question, and it's really writing, I don't want to say wrong, but writing a restriction on or a requirement for development that we never had in place.
So if I can add, oh, good, Commissioner Flynn.
So it's great you said this, Commissioner Grella, because I think you can anticipate in the upcoming budget a line item for an active transportation plan. We had a conversation, not just internally, but also with Dormont. They are also lining up for an active transportation plan based on, obviously, they've done a complete streets policy. We've done a complete streets policy. We all, to your point, recognize that this is a challenge. And this does need to be a comprehensive, thoughtful exercise. We need to bring in people to help kind of lay all this framework out. Manager McGill was at the meeting. Our planner Ian was at the meeting. A lot of Dormont, the Dormont team was at the meeting. I think there's a lot of great momentum. People are very supportive of this. So my expectation is that, hopefully we can fund that active transportation study. Because that's the foundational work we're talking about.
It makes sense to me. Just, you know, even if you pick an area and you say, look, there's a benefit to having a certain type of street or a certain type of mode of transportation in a certain area, even if you pick just one region or, you know, I'm not saying an entire ward, like a region, and you lay out the benefits for that, because you can't do it all. You can't do it all.
Right.
So if we pick one and we, almost like the way we were talking about streets, putting together, you know, how are we thinking about funding streets over the next 30, 40, 50 years?
This helps decide where we put some of the money. Because if this gives our residents a voice in where some of the sidewalks should go, and I always think we should protect that ability, which a sidewalk expansion policy does. If I had my way and had won, $1.5 billion in mega dollars, whatever it is.
Did you buy a ticket?
No, I didn't buy tickets. There's no problem there, but I'd be putting sidewalks every place because I'm that much of a believer in them. But, we have to figure out how to get them in and where, and this gives residents a way to do it.
The
Start
question
it.
for Commissioner Flynn, you mentioned the active, plan.
Yes.
So for a study, that's what I was like,
Yeah.
what's this, so you're talking about a consultant? At the risk of killing the surprise in the movie, what budget dollar do you think?
If I recall correctly, but the manager or Ian will have to correct me if I'm wrong, we were talking in the range of, I think, 100,000, but that was gonna be split between both municipalities. Obviously, we haven't figured out exactly how, but I think you can say geographically, we are much larger. But you can look at $100,000 number.
Okay, that's helpful to get some
Definitely
context.
impact each other, so it makes
Yeah.
a lot more sense to be
Yeah.
planning together, way more sense.
I just want to get some dollar context.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd gotten some ballpark quotes on that from our consulting team from the comp plan, because the same consulting team has done active transportation plans in other municipalities. So I kind of asked what the kind of going rate was, and about 100,000 for a combined plan was a pretty good starting point number. The other thing I did want to note, though, to Commissioner Grella's point on about needing a policy for this. So we have an existing sidewalk expansion policy that was adopted in 2013. And this slide that I put up on the screen was one that I showed back at the June 13th meeting as well, kind of about what the changes are right now. And really the changes that I'm proposing with this policy revision, the track changes document you all got this time did not track all the changes from the 2013 policy. It just tracked the changes from the document you were presented with back in June, because everyone was mostly on board with a couple small exceptions of what was presented back in June. So if you go back to the 2013 policy, there's wholesale rewrites of certain sections, and that's based on input from residents from the Environmental Sustainability Board that did some work on this. Sean Battis, who's now, I believe, on the traffic board, was on the Environmental Sustainability Board previously, put a lot of work into it as well. So we have taken some feedback on this as well. But one of the reasons I think it's important for the commission to adopt this is because I think, to Commissioner Rainey's point about it lowers the threshold, because right now, if we get a group of residents that come to us and say, we want sidewalks on our street, we're bound by the current policy that was adopted in 2013, which means we have to say, okay, go get 75% of the property owners on your street to, sign a petition and agree to take part in this. Whereas the revisions to the policy, I think, make the process a little more streamlined and somewhat similar to the current process we use for the neighborhood traffic calming requests, with a few small tweaks.
So the question for Commissioner Ian is looking for some direction from us to say, is this votable? Do we have enough here that it goes on the agenda for us to vote on?
Yes.
I'll support it. I would prefer zero cost sharing, like I said a lot already, but still support this stuff.
My question, just to be sure, that 100% resident agreement, that's still in here somewhere.
It's in here, the
Good.
overall goal of the policy is to, or no, wait, else.
That just,
Yeah.
that requirement, that
Oh,
I
yeah.
want to make sure. that-
The bottom of page 1, 100% of the affected property owners agree to accept new sidewalk construction, cost sharing, maintenance, yada, yada, yada. Last paragraph on page 1 of the draft.
Yada, yada, future lead, yes. So,
And we did talk a little bit about that last time, and it is here on the sort of tail end of the policy process, that 100% of property owners you don't need the 100% agreement at the very beginning, right? It's much easier to get into the process, but at some point we need it. But it's also kind of a carrot and the stick thing, and I know we talked about this last time, that this policy is kind of the carrot of saying, hey, residents, we'd like you to cost share with us to get sidewalks put in, but none of this takes away from the commission's statutory abilities to order sidewalks in by resolution. And as you'll recall, from the prior presentation, let me find the slide on it. There it is, that the commission can,
Got it.
Ian,
There we
Ian,
go.
Ian,
Understand.
I interrupted you for a second.
Yeah.
I got 3 yeses.
Okay, all right, we're good. Yes, so there's, yeah,
I had
the
one,
commission can always order them in.
yeah, and I had one like grammar question, Alistair, or something for you on
Sure.
page 2, under
Okay.
for residents on streets, section number 1. It used to say a property owner or group of property owners, but then you track changed and crossed out a property owner. And I
Mhm.
wanted to be sure that a property owner still could make a request, because if in the situation that you outlined for us, if there's only 3 houses on that segment of street.
Yes.
So could we put that back in to word it a property owner or group?
Yeah, we could do that. That's fine.
Thank-
Yeah, yep, because the intent there was like we talked about some of those sections on Woodland last time where there's, 3 houses in a segment, 4 houses in a segment, that we don't need 3 of the 4 to file a petition to get rolling. We could get one of them and start moving along.
Property
Okay.
owner or group of property owner as applicable or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Applicable rules, something like that. So, all right, so you got direction, you'll get this.
I'll get this to you and we'll put it on the commission agenda for a vote at the next meeting.
Beautiful. All right.
Thank
any
you all.
other Thoughts on this? All right, we have all of, 10 minutes before the IDA meeting, unless we want to talk about boards and authorities. What? The updates, so it's summer, there may not be any meetings, that's.
Is that?
You're expecting.
Parks has been meeting, though I'm not ready to talk about, everything that they're doing. Frankly, I'll just say that the Parks Board is, as Commissioner Randy has said many times, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
They are truly doing yeoman's work on the community's behalf. We looked at some preliminary information from the consultant doing the invasive study. Some really interesting visual tools on, visualizations on GIS, looking at tree heights, understanding, there are areas, we were primarily looking at Bird Park around, where do you see invasives, where do you see mature tree canopies, how does that, how do we understand, what needs to be done? An interesting discussion out of the presentation was that, much of the space up, along Washington Road of Bird Park is very much, I think it was black cherry, was that right? Locust, thank you, black locust. Black locusts, which are, really a big challenge. And that space, you might almost want to think about, clear cutting that and replanting that whole area, which is obviously a very large challenge. But because there's such a, the space is so difficult to work with, that it might be that type of solution that needs to be considered. But the consultant's doing some really interesting work. And it's all, they're making a lot of the information available online. On our GIS, we've put grids on all the maps, all the GIS maps, so that if someone's walking through a park and they say there's a tire or there's trash or some issue in a park, they could actually pull it up on a map and say it's in this grid. So trying to do a lot. The other thing is that, as I'm sure you all saw in your emails, the signs,
Yes, I did see the signs.
sign information is coming out.
Moving out.
So signs are looking good.
Awesome.
Glad they're
Thank
using
you.
Solana, that's.
Another question, and just more of an update for everybody. The parks evaluation, we're talking about Main Park, is the decision on how to utilize Main Park, and I know that's ongoing. As a reminder, when that report is due to be issued.
Well, just through the end of the year.
Yeah.
Talking about the main park site plan, the
Yes.
architectural
Yes.
study for
Because they
the.
said they want to be out in summer
Yeah.
to be talking to residents, so hopefully they're out and about and collecting some good data.
Haven't heard anything yet.
I've been gone for 3 weeks, no idea. Have to check back in with Mr. Ian.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot, sorry. The
Vacation.
way the sunlight's coming in, it feels very Perry Mason.
You heard his name.
Yeah, the goal is to have it done, or at least have some recommendations pretty solidly in place by the end of the year. So yes, the hope is that the consultant can get some at least loose recommendations for the commission around budget time. So they
Great.
have begun work on the project.
Well, and when you said end of year and budget time, those ones feels like a November 1st deadline, the other is a bit later, so.
Yeah, final plan by the end of the year, but loose initial recommendations by budget time to start considering.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. All right, anything else? All right, we're gonna have, we'll adjourn discussion session, have about 5 minutes to twiddle our thumbs, because we can't have idea before 7:55.
Really? Right.
Yeah, so adjourn for discussion, get back to 5 minutes.
Did you get it?
I did.
Gluten-free cookie?
I did.
Cool.
Our meeting is, thank you, thanking you.
So we're allowed to say where the undisclosed location.
Of West Virginia. Yes.
There, San Diego, and.
Yes.
Questions here?
No, only.
That's the general meeting, and there's a sign of.
Thank you for being on the end. Appreciate it. I don't need to be for the IDA meeting.
There's a sign up sheet for the IDA meeting, but that's strictly limited to IDA. Because we do have citizens comments for that. You might be the first in 10 years to comment at IDA. We don't have to.
But it also feel like
That's what I was hearing all the time. I can't say firmly, but I got the same take I got on the cable going. I certainly heard that indication, but I can promise what I'm gonna vote. I can't promise what they're gonna vote,
The other side.
but that's certainly what I was hearing. But if you want, if you want to, in the other room, that's the sign of sheet. Yes.
Don't worry.
I heard cats, just as good as. My second go around as president, and it's one of those things
I
where.
just want to make sure you got all
Have
the
to do it.
information, big turns for service or.
prisons.
We don't want.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
We want to buy this
Okay.
brand called Go.
It's kind of.
There's like only one place in North America, still gotta bid it.
Yeah, we're
running out on
equals.
Yeah.
So do you want to, comment?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't think it needs to. You guys need to write knowledge.
You did a brand. You can only have name of the sheet and we want to call you. Never mind, I'm good.
We're just talking, I guess.
Okay, I don't even know where, bid specifications for these things. Yeah. So just say, that's what we're looking for.
Garbage bag.
I was trying to think, was and I should say that, but yeah, again, I heard at least three. But again, I can only talk about what I was gonna vote. I have a sense of what the group's gonna do. Bidding a moment.
Somebody can always say, I have.
You guys already made.
You signed up for Citizen Compson for the IDA meeting. It said, no,
Right.
because you signed up for our IDA. So you-
Well, I told him to come.
Well, he said he was the president of school board twice, so.
Municipality wanted to say.
Here twice.
Yeah.
Our meetings went, but I was home, I was herding cats.
Said no, the same, we have trucks that do the same thing. That was.
Yeah, that's true. What I'm saying. It's tough for you guys to stay up late. It's the same.
Trucks.
Now, your turn. And I think it's a good group, and I think every group has.
So they actually were able to get.
You know, and you just.
Well, and see, we could probably say something similar if we wanted to go with Zamboni. Yeah, and I think Zamboni's actually
But,
on
you
a
know,
state.
you have someone in the room who does.
They're way more expensive.
Things forward, that gets sticky.
I know.
Yeah.
So we have to go through the motion.
Okay, good, yeah.
All right.
Sorry, Mr. Second
That's
call.
what I needed.
I knew where you were at.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Better get that sign up sheet out of there.
Thank you.
I don't know how to write that better. It causes.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, I thought of you
Yeah.
when I saw that horrible drought or in paper.
Oh, I just think of that. I don't have any details like a 4-year-old.
No, we're probably almost 5 because they thought it was 5. Just like.
Well.
It's there by the grace of God. It does happen. And you don't know if the resuscitation is gonna work. I mean, we're lucky. You know, that's just. I mean, you know.
And frankly. In spite of what those two women posted all
Yeah.
over social media. Nobody else says she wasn't conscious. My staff is like, she was screaming when she came out of the water.
Where those that jumps the word actually.
Does it?
This is what I meant by it is,
That takes a primary.
there's 100 different stories and there are small variations. That's a big one. But I have several different people who are like, no, she was screaming when she came out. So, yeah, exactly. I wasn't there.
All right, I need one more commissioner, although
Okay.
In any event, she was in very bad shape, whatever, you know, if she was vomiting much, fluids and blood, I mean, she definitely was bad. But,
Now, I just, I mean, you know,
it's
and the
a,
question of how do we not have it not happen,
yeah.
I don't know how.
I didn't have a chance to make.
Well,
it.
for the exciting
It's
idea. Scary,
yeah.
area of recreation where consequences are very high.
Yes, they are.
And I.
Oh, wait, is it over here?
It should-
Every year.
Mhm.
I think we've got their attention now.
I bet.
Yeah.
They're looking much more alert and
I just have to
prepared.
be
Yeah,
part of
yeah.
the forum.
We've been
Yeah,
on
right.
it.
Yeah.
I think it worked.
Good.
All right, welcome back. It is time for the IDA meeting of Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. We call the meeting order. Mr. Rainey should start without her, but we'll have to pick someone else to do item 2. Who wants to read item 2?
Item 2, consideration of the minutes from meeting held May 9, 2023. I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? None. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next, citizens' comments, and I see no one interested. I see no one to speak. There is no one but the solicitor in the audience. So next on the agenda, item 4, Manager McGill, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. There were no new borrowings for the IDA, no new activity, I should say. And as such, the next meeting for the IDA is scheduled for November 14th, 2023, and the commission has the balance sheet that was provided to you by the finance director.
Do we have meeting date set for 2024 yet?
We will, I'll have those.
2024.
Well, it's our last one in 2023. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
November 14th is the last one in 2023. At that meeting, we will announce the dates for the 2024.
I can hardly wait.
Good tell. All right. Anything else? All right. Anything else? All right. We are adjourned.
Hey.
You run those